You are listening to the Amodama podcast. In this series, Amoda explores her essential teaching through conversation and excerpts from interviews and events. To find out more about events and to sign up for her newsletter, go to www.amodama.com. Please subscribe, comment, and share if this podcast moves you. And if you feel called to donate, please go to the website. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Okay. Hello again. My name is Kavi, and I am here with Amoda once again for another conversation. Hello, Amoda.
Hello, Kavi.
So, Amoda, in discussing what kind of subject matter we were going to dive into and explore, it seemed quite fitting that because you currently have a meditation series called the Tantra of Life running, which is, I know, a new venture for you, that it seemed like it might be opportune to actually talk about what on earth Tantra might mean in the context particularly of what you're offering, of the teaching that's coming from you. So let's explore this subject of Tantra a little bit. I know I want to ask you about, because we talked about this before, about the relationship, if there is one, between Tantra and non-duality. Yeah? So I'm going to bear that in mind. I'm going to be throwing that one at you later. Obviously, Tantra, like many of these, words used in the modern and old, I think, spiritual idiom, comes with a lot of baggage. I think that's right. That's fair to say. I've got a dog harassing me here. Is that Tantra? Yes, that is Tantra, Kavi. Yes, it is. We're going to have to try and work with the dog. He might settle down, I hope. So look, let's dive into this a little bit. The first thing I want to ask you really is Tantra a thing, in the sense that, is yoga a thing? Can we name it as a thing, or is there something deeper? Should we go, dive deeper than that? And before you jump into that, I want to precede that with, we're not talking about the historical nature of Tantra. We're not talking about even its roots, although you might touch on that. So we're not, for those people who might have seen the title and look for a kind of teaching of what is Tantra in that kind of sense, you're going to be disappointed. But at the same time, you might be interested or enlivened by a kind of something that arises in this conversation. So I've rambled, that's for sure. So over to you. What is Tantra? Is it a thing? Where are we going to go?
Okay, thank you, Kavi. So I'm going to just perhaps open up the conversation, not in direct response to what is Tantra. I'll come to that, but really in response to you saying that we're not going to be providing a historical context for Tantra and all of that. So just to say that I won't call it knowledge, but my experience of Tantra and my understanding of the Tantric approach to life has come about through direct experience, not through knowledge. It is not something that I've looked for as a path, or as a way of accumulating, spiritual philosophy or spiritual knowledge. It's come about, and perhaps we can talk about it a bit later, so I won't go all the way into that now, but it's really come about, I would say accidentally, but I don't think there are any accidents in life, but it's come about, let's say, unbidden by the seeking self. And so I kind of found myself immersed in a tantric, energetic experience in many ways. And so I found myself immersed in the deeper current of Tantra. And I think that's what we'll be unpacking here. So nothing historical, philosophical, and all of that. Let's go back to your question. What is Tantra a thing? Well, because of what what I've just said, that I didn't seek it as a thing, as a practice, as a philosophy, as a, trophy of knowledge, then my deeper understanding or relationship to Tantra is that it is not a thing, and that the Western mind loves to accumulate things. So we see that with yoga. Yeah, yoga is also not a thing, but has very much become a thing in the Western world. What we mean by a thing is a practice, a
method.
Yeah. A method, something that we do. Yeah, we do yoga. We can also do Tantra. There's a whole series of tantric practices. I was having sort of informal conversation with somebody the other day who when I mentioned that I was offering a series of tantric meditations, told me he was a tantrika. And when I said it had nothing to do with practices, and usually it's sexual practices to do with the polarity of male and female, he looked quite dismayed. I didn't go into what I meant by Tantra, but that's what we're exploring here. So it's it's not a thing. My immersion into it, my understanding of it, is that it's not a thing. We can make it a thing, and then we can do the practices, but still we're missing the deeper current that takes us beyond all things.
I mean, so it's not to dismiss those, just to be clear, it's not to dismiss those, let's say, practices, Tantra or yoga or whatever, meditation. It is because there is a purpose in those things. So usually to take us from really, in a way, point A to point B or to point Z, to heighten consciousness or to deepen consciousness or to give an experience beyond the mundane, beyond the horizontality, as you and I like to talk about it. So, or to have a glimpse or to reach union, in the case of Tantra and its sexual practices, either, to reach a state of union beyond, as you say, beyond polarity. So it's not to dismiss those, but there's a conversation to be had beyond the beyond. It's for you, as far as I understand it, the way you're referring to it is more an approach to life, not a mental approach. That's the nature of this conversation. It's not that it's a mental approach, not that it's a philosophy, although it has a philosophical idea or possibility or notion to it, but actually it's in the living, breathing of this approach to life. So maybe we could explore actually what is being pointed to by the tantric approach to life in your world or our world.
Yes. Yes, I mean all the practices, all the meditations, all the postures, all the whatever they are, techniques, methods, are all designed to take you into that deeper current where all methods fall away. They're designed to take you to the beyond. It's only the acquisitive mind that stops short of that. So to put the practices into, or the methods or the philosophy even, into the context of, what's the point, then that kind of shifts things. It hopefully softens the tendency to hold on to the practices as the primary point of it all. Yeah, they're really just a vehicle to get you across the shore. So,
and often practiced error, as far as I can see. That the boat that takes you to the shore is not the thing.
Yes.
At some point, you have to get off the boat and leave the boat behind and burn it or something, because you've reached the shore that you were aiming for. But actually, you got so much out of being on the boat that you actually go backwards and forwards on the boat.
Oh yeah. Yes. I mean, there can be a lot of enjoyment or attachment or
specialness.
Sense of specialness in being in the boat, rowing the boat, navigating. That we forget that the shore is waiting for us, and there's no boat required there. So, having said all that, what direction shall we go in?
I would like to know what the tantric approach to life is.
Oh, okay.
What is this? I know we're going to talk about intimacy. We're going to talk about intimacy, and we're not just going to talk about intimacy between human beings. We are going to talk about the deepest level of intimacy with life, because I know that's going to come up. So I've already flagged that up, because people are going to be interested in that, I believe, because it's deep, it's challenging. It's a challenging word for a start, even between human beings, let alone with life and its myriad of insults and experiences and challenges and hurts and pains and wounds and yada yada yada. So talk to me about that.
Yes. Good starting place. It is about intimacy. That's why Tantra uses the male-female polarity of a sexual relationship as a microcosm of the bigger intimacy that is what really Tantra is about. It's the intimacy with life. It's the intimacy with all energetic experiences. Everything that a human being can experience, from the highest ecstasy to the peak, from the peaks of ecstasy to the valleys of darkness, fear, desolation, whatever it might be that is so scary as an experience. All of that, every single feeling, felt sense, and energetic experience that a human being is capable of. The true meaning of Tantra is to be intimate with all of it. In other words, there's no avoidance, there's no rejection, there's no higher or lower. My experience of Tantra that was what I call an energetic experience, beyond any sort of traditional or conventional idea of what Tantra is, was an immersion into the inner landscape of all felt senses, from fear to abandonment to ecstatic joy to whatever we could call it an emotion, but it was kind of more than an emotion in the sense that it wasn't about something. Through certain tools of breath and movement, an inner landscape opened up that hadn't been in the forefront of consciousness or awareness or the felt sense. And in that energetic experience, I learned isn't the right word, but I was, it's almost like the self expands and merges into the totality of life without contracting. If you like, Tantra is the end of contraction. It's the end of the contractive self. It's the end of the boundary of self that says, I won't go there. This is acceptable, but this is not. I can feel this because I really want it. I covet it. I elevate it, but I reject this. It's the end of that boundary of self. That boundary is in the mind. It's also in the felt sense. There are feelings that we don't want to feel. Immersion into the energetic field of Tantra takes you beyond all that. You're invited to soften the grip of the self that says, no, I won't go there. Yeah? And in that, one, again, I use the word learns, but I don't mean it intellectually learns, energetically learns to be okay with all energies. So it ends the fear of life. It ends the me against life, or the me attempting to control life, or the me attempting to grasp life. It's a very felt, energetic, visceral sense of letting go of resistance, of letting go of the no. Yeah? And in that, there's a deep intimacy with everything. A deep intimacy, both with the human experience and the transcendent experience. Yeah, there's no division. It's like a merging of self with the totality of existence. So you go beyond duality. To me, that's the ultimate aim of Tantra, is to go beyond duality. Duality is in us, yeah, as the divided self that is in opposition. It's either in opposition or it's in agreement. It's in disagreement or it's in agreement. And that creates an inner conflict, and also an inner, like a wall, a boundary in ourselves that says, yes, this I will accept and this I won't. Yeah, Tantra goes beyond that. It ends all division.
Okay. That's provoked probably about 3 or 4 days worth of questions. Okay, so I mean, as you're describing what obviously, arose for you as a personal experience, I want to look at that for a minute. But But also, as you're speaking, you know, what you're describing is not so very different in many ways from non-duality. It's not. What you're describing is almost in my the way I perceive it, the wet, what one might call the wet version of non-duality. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. It's not. It's the same. It is non-duality, and to me, that was my experience of non-duality. I didn't call it non-duality then because I wasn't aware of that term. But that is a non-dual experience. The subtle, not difference, but the subtle. We can refine. Yeah, non-duality. Ultimately, it's the same. Yeah, it's the end of the divided state, which is what non-dual awakening, non-dual realization is. The only proviso in that is that non-duality can remain, not always, but it can remain as an intellectual or a mental, a realization from the mind. A direct experience of awake awareness, but it doesn't always filter into the felt sense and the whole body mind vehicle. The body tends to be excluded.
Yes.
And Tantra includes that. So like you say, it's the wet side, the juicy side, the felt sense, which is why many of the practices or the doorways, I prefer to call them doorways, many of the doorways for this full embodied non-dual awakening which we might call Tantra, is through physical practice. It's through the breath. It's through, like I say, the direct felt sense experience of a vast array, or let's call it an infinite possibility of energetic feeling, emotional, all the felt senses that a human being can have, which non-duality tends to overlook. And also through relationship and sexuality is included in that, the polarity of sex. All of it is included in Tantra, which brings non-dual realization right into the body and includes it rather than denies it. So it's a much more holistic, total experience, which to me is more complete or more valuable or more wholesome. Yeah.
So it's almost like, from your perspective or from our perspective, non-duality needs the tantric approach. And actually, the tantric approach also needs non-duality, because the tantric approach, sort of on its own, can tend towards a sort of, in my humble opinion anyway, a sort of indulgence and an attachment to the boat, as we said a little time ago. Whereas when it's framed and when it's held in the non-dual, those two things together can actually bring that beautiful non-dual awareness into the very fabric of our lives. Because that is something that we see, you and I see over and over and over again, because we work with a lot of people, and a lot of people know a lot about non-duality, but it's not in their day-to-day, the very fabric of their lives. And there's the rub, how to get it into the fabric of one's life.
Yes, both. It's like they're two sides of the same coin, and one without the other isn't the complete picture. And there is a sort of danger or a stumbling block or a blind spot on both sides of the coin. So with non-duality, as you say, it's the negation of the body or the felt sense. When I say the body, I really mean the felt sense. And relationship, or all relationships, the relationship with every aspect of our lives. None of it is not sacred. Everything is sacred. Everything is holy ground or fertile ground for realizing godness, God nature, Buddha nature in everything.
Is that sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but is that a perennial truth of the kind of a tantric way of life, that everything is sacred, everything is divine?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, we can talk about that more, but let me just finish by saying, so then on the other side of the coin, the stumbling block or the blind spot is that, like you say, there is an indulgence because the practices are very physical, they're very energetic, they can be ecstatic. Dance, spontaneous, free-form, chaotic dance is also tantric. Sufi whirling is also tantric. Shaking, meditation is also tantric. These are all, through the gateway of the body, but actually it's beyond the body. It's an energetic gateway. All of these doorways can be very ecstatic, very expanded, very they awaken the heart, the vast heart, big heart. And there can be an attachment to that because it's so juicy, it's so joyful, it's so expanded, it's so liberating. And so there can be an attachment or an indulgence in the repetition of the felt sense, and then a dependency on that. And that goes all the way through to the sexual practices as Tantra is more conventionally understood. And there can also be a sort of addiction to that, if you like, that isn't seen. So both sides of the coin, the non-dual and the tantric, has a certain, if you like, limitation from the perspective of the limited self. When we go beyond the limited self, when there has been a true awakening out of the boundary of self, then Tantra and duality become one, and all dependence on any ideology or on any methodology comes to an end. And then you're truly living the tantric way, or you're truly living the non-dual way, but in a way that is both. They're not in opposition or different from each other.
I think that, as you're talking, I think one of the last step, if you like, is to give up all practices, because in giving up all practices, as practices, as such, as you're talking about, don't no longer sort of do whatever is written on the box. There's no need for practices, and that's the ultimate merging with life.
Yes, and we can't give them up.
No.
They fall away on their own. Yeah. We can't really make the choice, because any choice made from self, now I'm ready to give this up, really is coming from still the limited self.
I know, but
eventually it'll come back. So it just has to fall away by itself.
But when the fruit is ripe, it falls from the tree. And that's a fair analogy for what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Because the tree doesn't die. The fruit is gorgeous. It has its function, and it's in harmony with all things. It's in harmony with nature. And I think that what I hear is that this is both the non-dual and the tantric approach to the intimacy with life, as where non-dual awareness filters into the very, very fabric of one's life. Then eventually the fruit will fall from the tree. The fruit being the practices.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, yes.
So I want to ask what intimacy with life actually means and go deeper into that. I also want to go back to what we said a minute ago, which is the divine, God in everything. Because I saw on the advert or the event listing, you've quoted Tagore again. In order to find God, you must welcome everything, which I know is in your first book, and it's followed you around this. So it obviously resonates deeply in your circuitry, in your deep within you. And it's not an easy thing. When I read that, when I heard that, it's the same as Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti's, the difference between you and I is that I don't mind what happens. This is a different thing, but it's very similar in a sense, because it's extraordinarily challenging to the self, to the small self that walks around in its righteous bubble. In order to find God, you must welcome everything.
Yes. So going back to our conversation just a little earlier, talking about, I think we touched on how I sort of fell into the tantric way, or the deeper current of Tantra, and even the deeper current of non-duality. Long before I'd heard that term, or it had come into my orbit, because I wasn't really, although I was a spiritual seeker, I wasn't a spiritual seeker in quite the same way, or with the same access to terminology and teachings that are around today. Everything was much more hidden, and non-duality had not become a sort of almost everyday term, every day, at least for the spiritual arena. Really, my approach, if you like, or the doorway that opened for me as I was looking for happiness, or looking for peace, or looking for love, really, or looking from freedom from suffering, was I don't mind what happens. It was the will. Well, we're going again in some ways a big circle to some of our previous podcast conversations and many parts of my teaching, which is surrender. Yeah, surrender became my path, because I saw that fighting with the argument with life, fighting with life, resisting life, was the cause of suffering. And when I say life, and this is where it gets sometimes confused, I don't mean just the circumstances, although it includes the circumstances, because the circumstances are catalysts for our inner experience. But that's what I really mean. Our life is our inner experience. We might think it's because of what he did to us, or of what, the partner that's left, or the dog that's died, or the job that's been lost, or the bank account that's empty, or whatever's happening in life. It's not. That's not what we mean, or what I mean by I don't mind what happens. It's the feelings, the inner landscape that's opened up in response to those happenings. It's that, and that's what we argue with. Yeah, so we experience loss, or we experience something unexpected, something unwelcome, from a minor thing to a major thing, to a very a hiccup in our landscape that takes us into regret, or anger, or sadness, to something that's much vaster than that, like a sense of desolation that lasts for a long time, or abandonment, or aloneness. And it's that inner landscape that we fight against, that we reject, that we try to numb ourselves from, or deny, or avoid in some way, or suppress. Welcoming everything. In order to find God, you must welcome everything. Or, I don't mind what happens, is in response to that, to the inner landscape. And that's what I discovered for myself. And that's what my immersion into tantric energetic practices, it wasn't just that. But it was in the bigger context of being in India, which in itself is a whole tantric experience.
Oh boy, that's pretty true.
Yeah, it takes you way beyond your comfort zone, and a whole other inner landscape. I mean, at least again in the days when I was going there, it wasn't quite the 60s, but it was the early 90s, and maybe it's different now. I don't know. But that's my experience of it, as it was yours, Kavi. But, and then being in an ashram without knowing what I was doing there, and all sorts of experiences, being on a beach on my own with absolutely nobody around in the dark, pitch black, for days on end, and being totally alone, and many experiences that took me way beyond my comfort zone. I learned that any attempt, or I don't know if I learned, again, that's the wrong word, but I started to see clearly. I started to see and feel in a much more acute or refined way than anything I had done before, living my sort of semi-normal life in London. It wasn't quite normal. I was always outside the box, but still. I saw how my resistance to my internal landscape of fear, of terror, of shame, of smallness, of whatever it was that was going on, of abandonment.
The whole protective self. The whole of
that was the cause of my suffering. That was the cause of my pain.
But this takes a lot of to let go, to move beyond the protective veneer of self, the coat that we wear, the armor that we, that shields us, which is, you had your fair share of wounding, trauma, and brokenness, and so you had however fragile it was, you had a protective mechanism. It takes a lot. Most people are struggling with how to give up the protective mechanism.
Once again, it's
is this grace?
The analogy of the fruit on the tree. Well, in some ways, yes. You both have to have the tenacity to see what is the cause of your suffering, and nobody else can do that for you. But you also, there's a ripeness in the human soul. I can't account for that. There comes a time where the tipping point of needing to protect yourself and actually being willing to die, if you like, which is because what it feels like.
Yeah.
There's no choice. Because there is a choice, but
you went right. But I know you're a kind of misfit, like me before, if always, shall we say. But it must have been a gamble going to India in that way on your own, just saying, that's it. It's like, wow, that's where that's the measure of something, surely. I mean, that is putting yourself in the position where grace can happen, because we do, that is, you haven't got any control over grace, of course, such is the nature of what we call grace, but you can put yourself in positions where the self is vulnerable, the protective mechanism is vulnerable. It can swing either way, because actually, that is the gamble, surely. It could be, you could have got into all sorts of trouble on the physical level.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't account for that. There comes a point where you listen to a deeper impulse. I was in a very painful situation prior to going to India. So in some ways I had nothing to lose. I mean, I could have lost my life, I suppose, being in quite exposed situations on my own. But yeah, it was a gamble I was willing to take. I didn't really think it through. It was an intuitive move that did open me up to the unknown, and I grace does reveal itself in the unknown, or it can do. That opens the doorway. It opens the field. I had no expectation. I had no idea. I just needed to go beyond a very painful situation that I was trapped in. And I knew somewhere in me, deep down, that there was no growth for me. There was no evolution for me out of my very codependent, stuck, a violent situation that I was in, and I had to somehow break away from that to find myself, to find out who I am. I don't mean that in a non-dual sense, but just to break out of a very trapped situation and to feel my own energy. And there was many ways of doing that. And I could have gone to a Buddhist ashram in England, but I ended up, well, I did do that as well. But I also went to India, and that opened up a whole other doorway. And it did take me deep into the field of surrender, because I saw that resistance was futile. So when I came back to England, surrender became again, it didn't come from the intellect or any kind of philosophy. I'd experienced it viscerally, and I'd experienced the freedom that came, yes, as grace. Really, in the very last portion of being in India, it sort of almost descended on me. It filtered, I experienced a vast field of love that held me, not through any particular circumstance or relationship. In fact, none of that. I was completely alone most of the time. But I just felt it in me. Something was liberated. And I came back to England, to my home in England. And from that point on, surrender was the way. I didn't think about it that way, but I just knew it energetically. And it was through that constant willingness to welcome the totality of my inner landscape, which still had many, let's call it darknesses in it, or discomforts in it. But I was willing to be intimate with all of it. So I stopped resisting. And it's that led to a non-dual awakening. And what I would say was a tantric way of life from that point on.
Okay. Wow.
So when I speak about Tantra now, and it's actually not something that I've done very much, other than this more recent 7-week meditation series that I've been offering, it's really from that point of view, or that ground of living, or ground of being, that I don't even use the words divine really, but there's not, if we're going to use that word, I don't use it because it sets up a division between that which is divine and that which isn't divine. But truly, my experience and my knowing and my living comes from the place that Godness is in everything. Everything. There isn't anything or any experience that is not that is not a part of or an expression of the totality, which I would call God.
Yeah.
Even if it appears to be. Because many things and experiences and events and expressions and manifestations appear to be ungodly. And even that is an expression of the totality. It can't be any other way.
See, the mind will rail against that, of course, because the mind seeks its life in division. So immediately you were to say that, one would say from the mind perspective, no, I can't accept that. I can't accept that the horror of the world is included in the godness. But I think, that what you're talking about is in this kind of word totality is, and I do see this in you, and I know you've opened the door for me to dwell in this place as well, to actually live within the totality, as the totality, and for all things. It can't be one thing that's separate. It's either all separate or all part of the totality. And I think that is that is what this tantric approach offers, is this visceral sense. Because what I also believe somehow is that when people, I know for myself, it took a lot for me to cathartic. I needed to cathartic a lot of the pain, a lot of the rigidity, a lot of the protective mechanisms out of my system. I needed to bathe in something beyond, to let go of the fragile self, and to be able to scream, and for it not to matter whether I screamed, and spewed out anything. It didn't really matter. And in that, then there was a relief. I think there was a relief that actually I can let go of the small self and be held by something that I had no conceptual idea of. But when I fell into it, there it was.
Yes, I mean, it's so difficult, challenging for the mind to understand that even separation is an expression from the totality. And even the horror and the suffering of the world is an expression from the totality. It doesn't come from somewhere else. It's all born of the one, and only the deepest realization of that allows us to respond to it in a way that is truly intelligent, or truly a movement of love.
Well, we're back to a conversation that we will always come back and go round and round the same conversations, to take action in the world, to take action from the morally or even the ethically divided self, creates and perpetuates suffering. Mm-hmm. The heart must open, and for the heart to open, there must be it has to open somehow, and it has to go deeper than the heart as well. So, and from that place, there's a wholeness that is able to include, or say, to speak to, or that you're talking about. Sorry about that. I was just stumbling around trying to get to the words. Because it's not a mental understanding. It's a visceral, it's a felt sense. But it's even more than just a felt sense. It's a field of consciousness.
Yes. Just as you were speaking, I was feeling that, one of the biggest areas of resistance, avoidance, revulsion, even opposition that we have as a generalized humanity is around the reality of death, and that includes the reality of shall I call it decay, the end of all forms. And that's because I was really thinking about how when we take action in the world or in our lives from a place of that shouldn't be happening, we're kind of revulsed by it, we're repelled by it, we're repelled by death. It's too scary or too unknown or too dark, or it shouldn't be happening, it's such a bad thing, it's like the ultimate punishment or curse or something. And when we take action from that place, then it's not really imbued with love's intelligence. And so the Tantric way, which is in order to find God, you must welcome everything, is not only the meeting, the intimacy with every aspect of life, but every aspect of life that includes death. So Tantra has many meditations or contemplations which are to do with that. The end of the body, the decay of the body, the contemplation of death itself, being intimate with it, as intimate as one can be in the inner landscape, because that's what the contemplation is. But that opens a whole field of feeling around it. Do we fear it? Do we believe it's wrong? Do we find it distasteful? Are we, and so on and so on. So does it make us feel very alone? Does it make us feel scared? Does it make us feel vulnerable? And so on and so on. So all of it. And so we're talking about being intimate with the world, only when we can be intimate with the reality of suffering, with the reality of violence, with the reality of death, in whichever shape or form it comes, a natural death or a seemingly unnatural death. Only when we can become truly intimate with that and our inner landscape, our response to that, is there any opportunity to actually respond to what needs to be responded to in the world from a true place, not a divided place, not a need to get rid of place, but a need to take right action. So we're entering a whole other conversation here, I know. But
well,
so Tantra has valuable, Tantra, the Tantric way is not a self-indulgent way. It has true value for our relationship to the whole.
Yes. I mean, that's why I think that's why you've brought it to the surface, even though it comes loaded with a whole bunch of, ideas and misunderstandings and projections, that are inevitable with something that is so associated with primarily sex, because sex is still, has this quality, and has historically had this quality of being somehow wrong, somehow dirty, somehow, filled, imbued with all of this kind of stuff. So, when it's just associated with that, actually, it's such a limitation. That was my experience. I haven't talked about Tantra for a very long time, and I'm not that interested in talking about it. And I think it's very brave of you to bring it into the surface, and to the surface, and actually to deconstruct once again, some of the myths and ideas around it, because actually, in essence, you and I live an entirely tantric life.
Yes.
It's just ordinary tantra.
Yes. Let me just backtrack a moment. I'm going to pick up on what you said about its focus on sex. Let's just bring that into context. And one of the reasons that there are practices, one of the reasons, there are other reasons, but one of the reasons there are practices around the sexual interaction or the sexual relationship, bringing awareness to it, bringing totality, opening up or being intimate with the felt sense is because traditionally in the East, where Tantra arose, in the Eastern culture, and in the however many thousands of years it was that it arose, sex was seen to be something that you needed to hide, that was wrong, that was dirty, that was functional. So in the same way as Tantra brings contemplation to death, it also brought contemplation to sex. To bring it out of the sort of backwaters of unconsciousness into consciousness. And the reason that it's become so much the conventional view of Tantra today is that in the West, we've hijacked those practices. And so it becomes about the indulgence in the sexual senses and the sexual ecstasy. But its original inclusion of that was because sex was so hidden in in that historical culture, in that age, where it wasn't sort of brought into the open. It wasn't in the same way. It wasn't as liberated as it is in the West. So it was, So that's where it gets all confused. That's where it gets all mixed up. As for you and me in the tantric way, yes, we live a tantric way naturally, organically. There's a deep intimacy within the everyday experience. Nothing is avoided, nothing is denied. That completely transforms the nature of everyday life and the nature of relationship.
Yes, I think because so in the final minutes that we've got, I kind of sort of want to bring it down to earth a little bit, because there's been a lot of talk in a way about the tantric way and the sort of dismissal somehow of practices, but given that it's actually a visceral thing and not just an intellectual exercise, well, what then? We're stuck. People who are wanting to explore or find out. Yeah, I know we can talk about your meditation course, but that's not what I'm kind of pointing to, really. What I'm trying to say is, how is somebody who's listening to this going to get a visceral taste, a visceral sense, either right now or when we put the phone down, when the podcast is over, or tonight? Because it's the juice, it's the taste that actually makes people want to eat the cake. It's the taste of it. This is because
yes.
I want to offer something. I want to give something. I know in your meditation series, the first meditation, and we're on the third one now, and the first one was about the breath, and that is a very important quality to bring to it. Whether you want to talk about that as a thing or something else.
I'm going to go straight to this doorway of taste. Breath is definitely a doorway to intimacy with what is, but something even more, in some ways, direct or more down to earth, more accessible, and more reachable right now is taste. Every single human being can slow right down and have a tantric, intimate love affair with whatever is on their plate. To slow right down and to feel every morsel of food. Yeah? Mostly food is shoveled into the mouth. Yeah? It bypasses
awareness.
It bypasses awareness. It bypasses true taste. It bypasses true assimilation. It bypasses the very intimacy that it offers. So one way is just to put a very small amount of food on your plate. Yeah, not a big heap of stuff, something very small, and to eat it very slowly and to taste it and smell it and merge with it and let it linger. And you could even do this with your eyes closed so that you're not pulled by the desire to shovel it into your mouth. Yeah, to slow right down and not bypass in an unhealthy way, but to go beyond the addictive mechanism, which is the seeking of comfort from food, or the alleviation of the discomfort of seeming hunger, which I doubt whether many Western people are really hungry, and so on and so on. You have a love affair with each mouthful. This is something that each of us can do. And food transforms from being something to satisfy the addictive mechanism, or satisfy just a biological mechanism of the need for food, or satisfy the mind because it's bored or it needs, but starts to become true nourishment on a whole other level. It starts to refine itself, transmute itself, and the whole system has a relationship with it. This is a wonderful way to start being intimate with the direct experience of life itself. Form meeting form, but going beyond form. And it's a very accessible, easy practice. In fact, it was one of the main so-called experiments, let's call it, that I was invited into in my time in India. And it changed.
Well, when we did some tantric work, shall we call it, many, many, many years ago, and part of that was eating.
Yes.
Part of that was feeding each other and actually, doing the same thing. So we can do that for ourselves very easily. And I know how challenging it can be, because we do eat with an unconsciousness, and we do eat with a mechanism that we're unaware of that's playing itself out. And so, if we slow down and say, not today, we're going to do it like this, it can actually provoke fear. It can bring up shame. It can provoke anger. It can, all of these kind of things. And they have to be welcome as well. They're welcome to the party. They don't, to see how one's unconscious mechanism is playing out, which is part of the non-dual inquiry, of course.
Yes. It's a kind of purification of the addictive mechanism. The addictive mechanism of ego that seeks gratification. And so it's a very direct way of experiencing that and transforming that.
Yes, because on a recent training that we did, I remember you drawing attention to this, very thing. How does it taste? How does it taste? And people hadn't really thought about that. How does your experience taste? How does this moment taste? Are you tasting it, or are you completely unaware of it? And so it is. And so it is. Take that food, whatever it is. It can be anything.
Yeah.
Whatever food it is. And be conscious of it, of it coming into the mouth, into the system, into the organism, into the yeah.
It's like opening up all the senses, the sight, the smell, the taste, everything, whether it's a cup of tea or anything. And it's not about self-indulgence. It's not about getting lost in it. It's about being very sensitive to the energy, to the energetic experience.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to draw this to a close. Once again, I feel that we've scraped the surface a little bit and floundered around, and I thank you very much for your sharp awareness. Left to my own devices, I'd probably amble into all sorts of different terrains. But I thank you, Amoda, and thanks to people for listening. And I hope this was of some use. And maybe we'll touch on some thread of this again and see where it takes us.
Thank you,
any final words, or are you ready to finish now?
I'll see you in the kitchen. Or somewhere.
Well, I'll see you in the Tantric kitchen. All right, people. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast, and if you enjoy it, and we'll see you again soon. Okay, take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.